Okay, welcome back. We are on the HTML tags that we normally use for connecting to external content. But before we proceed, let's take a quick recap of what we have done so far. Okay, so we began our lesson by looking at what is an HTML tag, and we said a tag is a special HTML keyword or character that form the basic building block of an HTML document. Tags usually come in pairs: opening tag and closing tag. The opening tag is of the form left angle, name, and right angle. And the closing tag is of the form left angle, forward slash, name, and right angle. That is what we said about a tag. And then we move on to understand what is an HTML element. By that we said a pair of HTML tag enclosing an HTML content is referred to as an HTML element. That is to say that tags comes in pairs. In between the pair there is a content. The content can be also another pair of tags. So from the beginning tag to the closing tag, including the content, is what we call an HTML element. It is usually of the form tag, then content, and tag, or opening tag, content, and closing tag. So comparing with English language writing, we can say that a tag is equal to a word, whereas an element is equal to a sentence. That is what we said about an element. And then we move ahead to um, see how we can make use of some common HTML tags. We look at the HTML tag itself, the head tag, the body tag, the title tag, and some meta tags. Let's review them in the coding arena. Okay, so back to the coding arena. We already have our code in here. If you don't not have what we have so far or up to this end, then I'll urge you to find our lessons 1, 2, and 3 part 1. Check out on our lessons 1, lesson 2, and lesson 3 part 1. In those lessons, we learned how to set up our working folder and how to set up our working environment or our IDE, and we learned how to create certain basic HTML tags. Now, before we went for the break, we said that an HTML document begins by declaring the document type at the top of the file. An HTML document begins by declaring the document type at the top of the file. Now, it is not case sensitive. It isn't case sensitive. So instead of doc type, I can make it in uppercase as doc type. That is also very right. Now the declaration or the definition of doc type is given by left angle exclamation doc type space HTML and right angle. This is to tell the browser that this is an HTML document. And then we began the HTML document itself by declaring the HTML tag which is of the form left angle, HTML, and right angle. Now we said that tags comes in pairs. So as we have the beginning HTML tag, so we have the ending or closing HTML tag. And then in between the beginning and closing HTML tag, we have the HTML content. The HTML content. Of course, a content of an element can also be an element or multiples of element. So we have the head element and the body element. In fact, an HTML document, we said, is divided into two main parts, the head and the body. The head, we said, contains things that are not visible in the browser. The head contains things that are not visible in the browser, with the exception of the title and an icon which usually appear on the title bar of the browser. The head contains things that controls the body. And then with this meta tag here, we said for the browser to render our page properly and be able to translate all characters very well, we need to define the character set for the language. The character set for the language, and it is done by using a meta tag. And with the English and most common languages, we use the UTF-8. I mean, common Latin related languages, we use the UTF-8. Apart from the English language, I think Spanish, French, German, Fanti, Twi are all common Latin related languages. I mean, languages that use the Latin alphabet. Languages that use the Latin alphabet. Other languages that do not use the Latin alphabet are Chinese, Japanese, Hebrew, Greek, and what have you. Okay, so we said that the HTML body contains elements that render on the HTML page. HTML body contains things that render on the HTML page. And we added each one as an element within the body. Each one has an element within the body. Okay, so that was what we said so far during that session. Okay, so that was a quick recap of the coding session. Don't worry, you saw other items there I did not explain. This is because they belong to the next session. So let's find them out. Okay, so this is where we left. We looked at certain tags that help us to connect to external documents or items within our HTML page. We looked at the link, the script, the image, and video tags. I think we did not do any example on the video. We do that in another lesson. So quickly, let's go back to the coding arena to see how we use these tags. Okay, welcome back once again to the coding arena. This is our IDE or our development environment. We are here to review the various elements that we use in linking external files to our HTML document. Now, the first thing we look at is the link element. the link element. We said that the link element helps us to connect to an external CSS file. The link element helps us to connect to an external CSS file and is of the form left angle link keyword and then some attributes, and then we close it with / right angle. It does not have a closing tag because we said a link is one of those special elements that do not contain a content between the beginning tag and the ending tag. There is no content in between the opening tag and the closing tag. So therefore, there is no need to bring a closing tag. However, we just close it on the opening tag by introducing a / just before the right angle. And then we also talked about including an external JavaScript in our HTML document. Including an external JavaScript in our HTML document. Now, when talking about external or this while, I simply mean items that are not on this very page. Items or files that are not on this very page. That is index.html. So we said a JavaScript can be included by using the tag script. And then src attribute to the location of the file. So by this we mean asset is a folder, JS is a folder in asset, and main.js is the file within the JS folder. We also said that scripts is not a special element. For that reason, it has a closing tag. This is because in between the opening tag and the closing tag, you can equally type in your script. And then we said that to do the same thing for CSS, we rather use the style element. That is, if you want to type your CSS content directly on this page, you open a star and close a star, and then in between the stars, you type your CSS content. That was what we said. And then we went on to add an image to our HTML document. We went ahead to add an image to our HTML document. We said the img keyword is the tag for adding an image to a web document. So we have left angle, img, src, that is the resource locator for the image, which will help us to point to the location of the image within our website. And then if that image does not exist, we introduce an alternative text or an alternate text that will display when the image cannot be found. We also said image is a special character because the attributes are enough for it to function properly. There is no need for a content in between. So we don't have a closing tag. And finally, we went ahead to add an anchor to our web page. We went ahead to add an anchor or an A element to our HTML document. We said an anchor helps us to connect to multiple HTML pages. So the hyperlink that you normally see on HTML document is as a result of an anchor element, which is represented by the a keyword or a keyword. All right, so let's see how the browser rendered this so far, and then we proceed with our lesson. Okay, so we have our hello world in the browser, the image displaying, and then the anchor that links to the second external page we created about me. My name is Jojo, and so this is the about page we created as an external to the HTML page. All right. Before we go, let's look at the about page we created for the linking. All right, when we came in here, we created a simple HTML document by declaring the document type, opening HTML, adding a header with a title within, and then a body with an H2 within. That was what we did for the about page. Very simple and straightforward. All right, so that was it for this session. Thank you for coming around. Okay, so that is it for where we left off before the break. That is where we left off before the break. Hope you are following the lesson through. All right, so let's continue our lesson. Let's move on to the next page to see what we have for the rest of the lesson. Okay, so for a quick one, we are going to go a much deeper in HTML tags and see how we can form HTML elements with them. This time around, we are looking at the div tag, the p tag, and then we will look at the h1 all the way to h6 tags. We will look at the section and then hr and br tags. These are all HTML defined tags that help us to generate or develop HTML element within our HTML document. So, if you are ready, let's proceed to the coding arena. Okay, so welcome back once again for another section in our coding arena or within our IDE. This time around, we're going to go more deeper into HTML tags. We will be starting with the div tag, the div tag. Straight away, let's look at how it works. Okay, so we open our left angle div, then right angle, and then ideally we open our left angle right once again a forward slash and div, then we close it. That is how we create the div element. Now, in HTML, the div element is a short form for the word division. Division. It is used for dividing the HTML page into various sections. It is used for dividing the HTML page into various sections. What do we want to do by that? Normally, we would like to group items on the HTML page and then beautify them nicely. So, in short, if we want to divide our HTML page into sub smaller portions so that we apply different styling, different content. We use the div element. We use the div element. And like all other elements, the div element can contain other elements, which could also be other div element. So let's add one more div within. Let's label it space A. Okay, so let's duplicate that with space B within. And then let's add another sibling to this parent div as space AB. Okay, so as you can see, we have multiple divs, and one of them has two children and the other has no child. Now, you need to understand that a div, as much as it is used for dividing a web page into portions, it is just a placeholder. Without styling the various portions, it will just print them together. Let's have a look of what we've done so far within our browser. Okay, so what we have so far is that within our browser, in between the hello world and the image, we have space A, space B, and space AB, representing the various divs that we created. As you can see, they appear together just like that, very raw. If you remember, I said HTML document, actually print very raw on the page. It is the work of CSS and JavaScript to beautify and add automation to it. So don't be surprised it's so raw on the page. That is how HTML actually works. CSS will come in to make it so beautiful by adding colors, borders, division, sizing, and all those spices you see on the real web. All right. Okay, so now let's move back to the coding arena. You can see they are very close up together. We are going to introduce the the spacing or the line break element to break them out. Okay, so as you saw, the div or the div element were printed on the browser. However, they were very close together, one after each other. To help break them out, we have a special keyword for line break. That is BR for line break. Now, this is just a line break, and we're not going to put any content in between. So it is just an opening tag, and we close it right away. And if we are not going to add any attribute, of which commonly nobody adds attribute to a line break, you leave it just like that. Let's add another one below the first div. Okay, so we introduce two line breaks within our div element. Let's quickly see what we have so far on the browser. I refresh. Okay, so now we get some spacing in between our div element as a result of the line break we introduce. As a result of the line break we introduce. All right. Now, as we saw, there was no space in between the div space AB and the image. We can equally introduce a line break here. However, I'm going to introduce another HTML element that draws a horizontal line on the page. An HTML element that draws a horizontal line on the page, and that is HR. Okay, so the HR element is also another special tag, just like the BR or the line break. It just has an opening tag and we close it right away. I mean, usually these elements do not have attribute unless you want to maybe style it and give it a height, a color, or what have you. But without any styling, there is no need for an attribute. Okay, so let's go back to the browsers to see how our horizontal line or HR element will print on the page. All right, a refresh. Okay, so as you can see, we have a straight horizontal line printed in between space AB and the image. We have a straight horizontal line printed in between space AB and the image. That is as a result of the HR element we introduced. The HR element we introduced. All right. Okay, so that is it so far. Let's move on. Now, most of the time you see on website there are content for you to read, articles, essays, stories, and what have you. Now, to wrap this text or essay on the web page, we use a keyword or a tag we call paragraph tag. Paragraph tag, and for short, P tag. P tag. The paragraph tag or the P tag helps developers to create text content on the HTML page. So I'm going to straight away put some content in here. My name is Jojo Encho. Full stop. I am a software developer and a teacher. I am in Accra, Ghana, Africa. Okay, so the P element helps us to print um, essay or text content on the HTML page. The P element helps us to print text content on the HTML page. Let's see how it renders in the browser. Okay, so as you can see, in between the horizontal line and our image, I place the P tag and it prints nicely on the web page. It prints nicely on the web page. I want to show you something about this P tag. Let's go back. Now I have everything on one line. Let me bring them down, bring this one to down, and see how the browser will still render. You see, there is no change in here. As far as it is within the same P tag, it considers it as a single line. It considers it as a single line. So what do you think? If you want to bring them down, let's see. All right, if you want to bring them down or a line each, we introduce the line break element after each line. That is BR. Do you remember? That's for line break. BR. Okay, so after introducing a line break, we are sure to get each of the sentences on its own line. Each of the sentences on its own line. Let's see. Okay, so the line breaks brings each of the sentences on a new line. Each of the sentences on a new line. That is how it works. Now, instead of using the line break element, we could equally introduce multiple P elements. We can equally introduce multiple P elements to do the line breaking. So with the first line break, I'm going to remove that and change it to a multiple P element. Okay, so I'm going to change this to a multiple P. I remove that. Then I'm going to close the first P here and then open the new P. Let me align it properly. Okay, so this becomes 1P and this also become another 1P or paragraph. So we have two paragraphs. I'll still leave the two line breaks here to see if this sentence and these sentences will break away. Let's have a look. Okay, so as you can see, when I introduce a paragraph around the first sentence, we have some spacing around it. We have some spacing around it. Unlike the line break, we just move to the next line. The P element has some spacing around it. So take note. All right. Okay, so that is what we have so far for the paragraph or the P element. Now let's move on to introducing another keyword which functions just like the division. Here we will call it section. Now when you look at my IntelliSense, we have some definition coming from Mozilla Development Network. Mozilla Development Network. It says that the section element represents a generic section of a document or application. A section is a section in this context is a thematic grouping of content. Each section should be identified typically by including a heading H1 to H6 element as a child of the section element. All right, so that is what Mozilla Development Network says about that. We will look at that website later on when we are looking at certain tutorial sources. Okay, so let's create our section. And as it said, a section just works like a division. It groups certain content together to be identified as a single unit. However, ideally, within a section, you need to identify it with a heading. Then comes in our heading element. We have already known an H1, which I said is used for creating heading. So we can say header 1. And I said H families runs from H1 to H6. And that the smaller the attached digit, the bigger the font size it appears on the browser. Let's introduce H2 and H3 and see how they will print on the browser. H2, so header 2. H3, header 3. Okay, let's add up to 6 and see how all of them work. H4, header 4. H5, header 5. And then H6, header 6. Okay, so let's see how the section and the headers will print in our browser. Okay, we're going to refresh. Now, when you press F5 on your keyboard, F5, it will refresh the page for you. Okay, so as you can see, the section works just like the div or the division, and then we introduce the H family. As you can see, the smaller the number, the bigger the font size. So from H1 to H6, the font size begins to diminish, or it becomes smaller and smaller as we move from H1 to H6. That is, when we move from H6 downwards to H1, the font size becomes bigger and bigger. That is how we use the H family of element. The H family of element. So when you are developing your web application, you take note of the size you want, then you use the appropriate H element. You use the appropriate H element. So as you can see, the H6 is just slightly bigger than the P, and then H5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 keeps increasing in font size. All right. Okay, so let's take a recap of this lesson. Today we are looking at the division element. I said the division element is used for dividing the page into certain sections or smaller sections. And the division element is represented by the tag div. We can have multiple divs within a div, and it can keep going until you have what you want. And we have multiple divs alongside each other. And then we introduce the line break, which is BR, the line break, to ensure that you have breaks or subsequent element print on the next line. Subsequent element print on the next line. And then we went ahead to introduce the horizontal line HR, horizontal line HR, which helps us to print a horizontal line on the web page. We added the paragraph element P, the paragraph element P, which helps developers to print a section of text on the web page. A section of text on the web page. You need to take note that the P, unlike the line break, will have some spacing around them. The P, unlike the line break, will have some spacing around them. And then we concluded our lesson on introducing a session and header element. Introducing a session and header element. All right, this was very brief, but I hope you learned a lot. Thank you for showing up at the coding arena. Okay, welcome back from the coding section. I hope you enjoyed that session. That was very brief. I know you learned a lot. Now let's see what we've got today. Today we look at the HTML tag and the HTML element. and then we look at how certain common HTML elements are constructed. All right. With within our next lesson, we will look. Oh, okay, so that is it for today. In subsequent lessons, we will look at more HTML tags and how they form HTML elements. But before we move to this questions and contribute session, I would like to draw your attention to what has been happening so far. If you have taken notice, I keep mentioning attribute, attribute, attribute during the coding session. The link, we added some attribute. The anchor, we added some attribute. The image, we added some attribute. The script, we added some attribute. All right, so that gives us the next lesson we'll be looking at. Lesson 4, we will look at HTML attributes and then another concept called HTML properties. So join us next time in our lesson as we look at HTML attributes and HTML properties. For now, let's proceed to have some questions, suggestions, contributions, and what have you. Okay, that is it for today. My name is Jojo Encho. You can join us on our Telegram discussion group at learn underscore software underscore Dave. And then you can also reach out personally to me at Jojo Encho, also on Telegram. Thank you so much. I know you've learned so much today. Keep on practicing and join us next time as we bring you HTML attributes and HTML properties. My name is Jojo Encho. Hello world. Bye bye.